Okay. So, hi everyone. My name's Kara Riley. I'm a member of the Newtown Democratic Town Committee, and you're here for session 9 of the Newtown DTC's campaign training school. So, welcome. And our topic tonight is fundraising, and it's going to be presented by Jimmy Tickey. Jimmy is the district director to Congressman Jim Hines and was Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro's longtime campaign manager. He understands the levers of local, state, and federal government and has won 3 local elections in a traditionally Republican town. He serves on his DTC and on the Democratic State Central Committee. So welcome, Jimmy. Thank you for being here and doing this. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. I've pasted a link to Jimmy's presentation in the chat box, so you can access that at your leisure now, or you can copy and paste it and use it later. And also, Jimmy will be taking questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and then you can either raise your hand and then I can turn on your ability to speak, or you can put it in the chat box and I'll ask it for you. Okay, so without any further ado, welcome Jimmy, and enjoy.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Kara. That's such a nice intro, and so appreciate you having me, and nice to see folks logging on here. And I know tonight we'll have a discussion with those that are on, and I know that this is being recorded, and so hopefully this will be helpful for candidates and volunteers of campaigns for weeks and months to come as we move through this municipal election year. As Kara said, I have been a local candidate myself and have won in several local races here in Shelton. I live in Shelton for our budgeting board once, and then 3 times over for our planning and zoning, which we elect here in Shelton citywide. Enough about me. I'm happy to answer questions along the way. I'm really excited to be here tonight, and please do ask questions in the chat, or as Kara said, you can raise your hand, and she's helping here behind the scenes and behind the screen. But when I was asked to do this, I really was so happy to, because I know that when individuals are thinking about running for office and when they are mulling over perhaps even a re-election, the part that often scares people the most is the fundraising. You don't like asking people for money. It seems like a daunting task. And so what we'll do this evening over the next hour or so is go through local fundraising. This is definitely not about running for president or federal race or a state race. Those are different conversations. We're going to focus tonight on running for local office. I know what it's like to run for planning and zoning, a board of education, a budgeting board, a library board, council, and alderman. I know what it's like to run a mayor's race. And so we're really going to focus tonight on those local races and on local fundraising. And so in the chat, and when this is available on the Newtown Dems website, hopefully we'll link to this attachment that I made for us tonight as really to go through a guide, because though fundraising can be daunting, you really want to take it piece by piece, and then it's not so daunting, as with most things in life, right? So once you've decided that you want to run for office, you've made that decision, maybe you're running for the first time, maybe you are running for re-election, you should have around you a team. And so tonight we're not going to go into all the other parts of a campaign, the communications, the field, the issues, but we're going to talk about the fundraising. So a part of that team that you have should have a person to oversee all of your campaigns. I know for local races, that person is often you, the candidate, and you do want someone who is a treasurer or can help you with the treasury, and perhaps even a deputy treasurer. You know your race better than I do right now. If you're running for mayor, you might very well have your own committee set up, and you are going to have a treasurer and have a deputy treasurer. If you're running as a part of a slate committee for one of those local boards, you probably are running with the DTC slate. And so your DTC treasurer and deputy treasurer are helping you move through all the rules of fundraising. So however you're running your race, whether it's a separate candidate committee or through the DTC slate, you want to be in touch with the treasurer and the deputy treasurer. And that's really the best place to start. That when you think of your team, that you know that that person who is responsible for the treasury is a part of your team. And they are going to be a common thread throughout the whole conversation tonight. So what you want to do first and foremost, and I am looking at the handout that we dropped in the chat, is to make a budget. Before you start worrying about how are you going to raise the money, first let's find out, what do you need to do in this race to win? If this was a conversation about field and knocking on doors, we'd be talking about what's the win number, right? How many votes do you need to get to win? Well, similar to that, what do you need to do to win? And then what are the price tags associated with those things? So if you're running for the first time, you should talk with people who have run for office before, who have run for the position you're running for before, and talk with DTC leaders who have been around the block and they know how this process goes. If you are a returning candidate, then you know very well, what you've done in the past and what was effective and what wasn't effective. So you want to put down the things that you plan on spending money on. And I have some examples here in a draft budget that is probably more thorough than most local races, but I wanted to provide something that was probably a bit more in line with what a mayor's race would be. So feel free to take out whatever you don't need to pay for your efforts. But you're going to have lawn signs. Now, whether your DTC picks up the tab for that or you're responsible for that, factor in the expenses for lawn signs. For literature, social media and boosting and boost posts, which are ever more important and present in modern day campaigns. Are you doing any advertising? Are you spending any other funds on any other staff people or canvassing efforts? Do you have funds associated with your website, with your voter file access? And so go through some of the suggestions that I have here, but also look at your own past campaigns or talk with others, because every town's a little different. With how you run your campaigns. You might have expenses for the big signs that people put out. Your town may shy away from big signs like that and might do something like lots of postcards, right? So see what fits for your town, for your race, and develop a budget with those prices in mind. A good budget will not only have what the activity is and the money, but it'll have a timeline. Are you doing the postcards in April, or are you saving the postcards till September, October? Do you need the lawn signs right now, or can the lawn signs wait until August? So putting it in a timeline also shows you don't necessarily need all the money in March or April of the election year. And so the budget there should be what your activities are, what the expenses are associated with them, and a timeline by month. I suggest by month, as to how you'll get there. You also might be thinking of things that you'd love to do if you had more money. Maybe you're going to budget a couple $100 for Facebook boosts, but if you had more money, you would maybe do 1,000. Or that putting an ad in the newspaper is really not a great use of money because it's not targeted. It just goes out there for the masses. It's not a targeted expense. But if you had some extra money to play with, you would throw in that newspaper advertisement. So have a budget, and then have a bit of a reach budget if you surprise yourself with the fundraising, so you have some other ways to go to. Of course, mail is more and more expensive with the price of postage and all the rest. We won't go tonight into mailing programs, but I say it to mention that that should be an expense you're thinking about too. What is the cost for printing? What is the cost for postage? So get all that down, and a budget. Doing the budget will really make you feel good because you'll know what you need to raise, and you'll know if you fall short, what would be the things you'd cut. And again, if you do better, you can go to some of those reach items with your budget. And it also provides you a bit of a to-do list. A budget represents what you're going to do and what you're planning on doing. And so it really provides you a bit of an insight into a campaign plan. So I don't see any questions yet, so we're gonna keep going. So now that you've got your budget, and budgets can be tweaked, of course, but do your best to get all those quotes and get all those estimates at the front end of your campaign. Now what you wanna do is have a finance plan. And this is connected to really a campaign plan, because it's one thing to take a look at all the expenses that you're planning on spending money on in the coming months, but how are you going to now raise the funds to make it happen. So I broke this down into two areas. First, think about who can give you funds. You could give yourself funds, and candidates often do. Your family, everybody knows running for office is a family affair. And so you can ask your family members for their financial help, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, of course, your fellow DTC members, others that you've met in Democratic and progressive groups, and really think about all of the social circles and all of the networks that you're in. If you are involved in nonprofit organizations, local groups, think about the people that you have met with, that you have worked with, and that know you. Because if they know you, they're going to be so much more likely to offer you some help with your campaign. So think through, who are those people? You're probably doing that already if you're thinking about, who's my campaign team, who might want a lawn sign, who would help me write a letter to the editor. So also think about it in terms of who would be helpful in writing me a check or making a contribution online. So think about who those people are. Once you've assembled a list of who those people are, whether it's very specific and you spend a lot of time cleaning up an Excel sheet, or more broad and you know you'll need to go back to it and add some people, think about how you are going to raise these funds. And this is the really important part. How are the funds going to be raised? I hate to break it to you, but none of us with one tweet or one Facebook post are going to raise multi-million dollars and call the race a day. None of us have the political prowess of Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Pete Buttigieg, AOC. So we need to think tactically on the ground. How am I going to raise these funds? So let's start with a tried and true event that we have missed over the last year as we have dealt with COVID: in-person events. Those are hopefully events that will be coming back to us when it's safe to do so. But these are the sorts of events that you might have a campaign kickoff. You might charge per person, and that's an opportunity to raise money into an in-person event. And we'll look at one of those examples in a couple of minutes. We are in a virtual space. Virtual fundraisers are something we're getting used to. Maybe not as fun to be in person with everybody, but you will need to factor that in this year, especially for these next couple of months, if you need to begin fundraising, because we're still not fully out of COVID and all that comes with that. So think about what a virtual event might look like. You could do a really low donor level, like $10 a person, come meet you, talk about issues. Maybe you can get a guest speaker, and that would be a fundraising opportunity for you or your campaign or your DTC. So there's in-person events, there's virtual events. There's a thing in fundraising called call time, but that's you picking up the phone and asking someone for funds. Now, it's probably going to be one of those individuals that we talked about earlier: a neighbor, a family member, a friend, somebody you've worked with, somebody maybe you serve on a board with, whether it's an elected board or a nonprofit board. But that kind of one-on-one outreach, that personal ask, is going to go a really long way in you getting to your goal more quickly. And so I know that's the part that often is intimidating to people, to ask for funds, but you're asking for something that is not $1 million, but you're asking for something from them that is significant to them, that will help you achieve this goal of serving on a board. And if you've been knocking on doors, and if you've been working on your race and your literature, you know why you're running. And so an investment in you is going to help your town or your municipality or your local board that you're running for. And so if you've taken the time to work through that list of people, then you should be ready to make the pitch of, I'm looking for your help. It's just like asking for a vote. It's asking for someone to volunteer. You're asking for a contribution to get you to your goal. So that's call time. It's the most efficient way to go. There's no expenses involved in it. You're going to pick up the phone and talk to somebody. Perhaps you follow up, whereas there's often are expenses with certainly in-person events. So consider that level of call time. The other item that I put, which I kind of put all together, is email, online, and social media. As I said at the top, none of us are these top tier running for national office candidates. And so one tweet, one email, won't do it for our races, but I want you to be mindful of the role that online can play. If you are really organizing a well-run campaign, you might be building an email list. You can definitely provide that email list with some solicitations and ask them to help your efforts, and that you might see some returns through your email, especially for local candidates. Soliciting contributions through a Facebook post or Twitter post, it really doesn't work. You certainly can try it, because you might, over time, people might see repeated asks from you and they might do something, but I don't want to mislead you and make it seem that that is, a really effective way to go. It's for a local race, it's going to be that person to person events, phone call, perhaps on their doorstep if you're having a great conversation, the person and they want to help you, than blanket social media posts. But don't lose sight of it. Keep it as one of your tools in your toolbox. And the emails are definitely something that will be helpful as if you grow an email list. Now, depending on what kind of committee you have, if you're running for mayor, you likely have a candidate committee. If you're running as a part of a slate, keep in mind the connections you have or who you are and who you know, because you might be set up in a position to perhaps have some supports from some friendly political action committees or labor unions. Maybe you're a teacher, maybe you're a scientist. I know that over the last couple of years, we have had an increase of the amount of political activity from many, and those are now opportunities to have some PAC contributions from perhaps some statewide labor PACs, from other PACs, that might find that in you share the same values. And so there's limits on that, which you can chat with SEC about in Connecticut, but certainly that is something that is open and available to you if you want to solicit PAC contributions from groups that might be in line with what you're thinking about. Labor unions, working men and women, teachers, nurses. There's a lot of political action committees based on interests or life experiences that you may have had. While Emily's list doesn't necessarily get involved in local issues, that's an example to keep in mind, whereas Emily's list supports female candidates. There's other groups that have been established that support candidates of color, that support LGBTQ candidates, and so forth. So think about that as an option as you go forward. The last way that you could raise money is a bit antiquated, but I'm definitely including it on the list because as I think about my mom, if somebody was going to ask her for some funds, it's got to be a letter that goes on the fridge that she sees time and time again, and eventually you will get that return check in the mail. So direct mail is, yes, it is a bit antiquated, but I think that it still works, especially in a local race. And your towns better, your electorate better than anyone. So think about that letter solicitation where you're asking for support. That letter could include an invitation to an event. If you're doing an in-person event, that letter could be followed up with that phone call that we talked about. So don't discount a letter. I know some say that is really on its way out. That might be true, but again, your supporters and their comfort level. And so it's something that you should still think about to send letters. And all of those are ways in which that you could raise money. So let me take a pause because I see some questions. So Robert, how can you utilize endorsements to help fundraise? Is it worthwhile and has it worked before? Well, certainly endorsements are a way to validate your campaign. So if they're endorsements from leaders of issue groups, depending on what issues you might be, thinking about, but, if it was a gun violence prevention group, if it was an education group, or they might be endorsements from some of our elected leaders, right? Maybe, your congressperson or, the governor and so forth. So if you have the opportunity to be endorsed by one of those groups or one of those leaders, yes, that's certainly a way to lift up your candidacy, to let others know that you're viable, you're getting support, and that should be, put on, mailers that you're doing. That can be put a part of your social media program. And if those groups have endorsed you, that might be an opportunity to do an event, or at least a virtual event, right? If one of them endorsed you, maybe you can do a virtual conversation where you're bringing people to the table that care about that issue, but maybe that group has members or supporters in your town or in your district, and then you're bringing some new people to the table. So endorsements definitely can work. And there's another question here about direct mail, actually. Do you know if mail and letter writing is more effective for older voters? Well, I will go back to my mom. My mom is definitely not going to click a link on Facebook to contribute online, but my mom will definitely keep that letter, put it on the fridge, and send it back. So I think you should keep in mind who is your electorate, and providing a wide array of options for people to make a contribution to you is really the best way to go. So you'll have your Facebook up, and that might work for some people. If you're a younger candidate, I'm sure all of your friends, from high school and college will share that link and help there. But I would keep the letters as an option for you to have. It's good to have that content anyway. It's going to be who you are, why you're running, asking for support. And I think that it does work. And I do think that it works, especially for a segment of the population that was used to a lot of, mail solicitations. Not everything is trusted by email just yet. We're getting there, but I would not discount a nice solicitation letter, send it out. And especially, as I mentioned, if you really are going to follow up with a phone call, I'm following up on a letter that I sent you. You could even say in the letter, I'll be following up with a phone call, or I'll be following up to invite you to an event. And then it makes the letter a part of a conversation that you're having with people. You can maybe start with the letter, do some follow-up calls. If it's a person who you also had an email for, you could also follow up with an email, not all at once, not in the same week, but think of it as a part of a program where you are touching supporters through various means: letter writing, phone calls, email, online events, over the course of time. And they're going to really think, wow, this is a really well done operation. And I'm going to give, $20, $30, $50, $100 to this person. And Maggie comments how you can separate out. Certainly, if you've got Van, hopefully you all do, you know that you can cut all this data. So you can say, you know what, I'm going to take a segment of the population, or I'm going to take a segment of town, or I'm going to look at my supporters and the people that are over such and such an age. They're going to get a letter. Everyone else, I'm going to deal with in other ways. So you certainly can play around and see what works for you. And maybe that's based on your budget. Maybe that's based on how much you're raising, how well you're doing. If you're finding that it's been difficult to raise funds and you need to cut back, then you probably don't want to send a letter to a huge list asking for money. You want to pare that down. And thank you for those good questions. Keep them coming. So what you'll see here next in the handout is then developing that plan. And again, this plan mimics the budget. You've got your budget because you know what you're going to spend to make it happen and to win. And now you need a plan to get there. So what I would suggest you do is go through the ways in which you can raise money and itemize it out. Of course it can change, but at the front end of a campaign, itemize it out. So this takes the view of a little bit more of a more regular time, and we could easily have in-person events, but that kickoff event. Are you going to get 50 people at $25 each? That's $12.50 right there. Maybe down the line, you're going to do more of a cocktail reception, maybe a smaller crowd. Maybe you do $50 a head or more. That's at least $1,500. So spelling out what's the event, how much can it raise? Now, who's going to be invited? That list that you earlier worked on, the friends, the neighbors, your contacts, your networks. And you're also meeting people as you go through the campaign, as you knock on doors and you meet people who are supportive of your efforts. You keep building, and keep adding people to that list that wanted to be supportive of your efforts. I added in a virtual event, just a part of our reality right now. It's something you may need to do. You need to be accessible to people. You need to answer questions for folks, but you need funds in order to make your goals. I haven't seen too many expensive virtual events for local or state candidates. So keep it smaller. Maybe it is that $10 a person, $20 a person, suggested contribution. Make it easy, to kind of come and go, log on, you can get their support ahead of time and send them the link to the event or to the online event. And to the earlier question about endorsements, what can we do that makes the event interesting, right? We're all about getting a little zoomed out. It's been a long year. So can you bring in a special guest? Can you bring in a group that maybe focuses on a particular issue? If that's a route you want to go, you might think about doing a series of these. Maybe you can think of 2 or 3 groups or 2 or 3 issues, maybe do one a month, just as an idea to kind of keep it fresh, and keep it interesting, and also a way to bring in different people, because maybe some people care deeply about the environment and hearing from an environmental leader, and then others might be more interested in gun violence prevention, or somebody on open space, or there's so many issues out there that you can talk about, education and so forth. So I added in a line for call time, right? This is the part of the budget that you're going to be calling individuals and asking them for help. I know that might turn some people off, so you can cut the line, but I wanted to be consistent with what I was suggesting you do. So there might be a call time line where you can ask people for some funds, talk about why you're running, ask for their help. And also, you might find that throughout the course of the campaign, you are growing support. In other words, someone might say they supported you, but they see that you're working. Then you knock on their door. Your social media presence is growing. You're then growing donors. You're growing relationships with people who might come back to you and give another contribution, or who maybe were on the fence about giving to you, but now you've really convinced them, just because your whole operation is really looking quite professional, and that you're touching voters in so many ways, at the doors, online, through a mail program, and you are soliciting contributions for help to help make it happen. Because it's not just about giving you money, it's helping you achieve your goal. I am X amount of dollars away from achieving our goal for us to win this race, or for us to get one more mailer out. If you make it tangible and you make it real for people, they're always more likely to give, if they know that they're really getting you very close to your goal, to be able to do everything you wanted to do in the campaign. So I spelled out there the other areas that you can really take a look and estimate how much do you think you can raise in each of those areas to meet your goal. Any questions? Okay. And again, a personal touch really increases the response rate. If I don't know you, and I see a Facebook post, or I get a letter and it's not even signed from you, you've done it, right? It's probably not going to get very far. So really, that personal touch of a phone call, of a personal note, that's what's going to go really far for a person who thinks, wow, you're really taking this seriously. You really have a personal touch, and that you are really working it. They might see you in the neighborhood knocking on a door. You might get an interview in the local newspaper. As you can see, I keep bringing it back to all of those layered communications are really going to show that it is a serious campaign. But that personal touch with fundraising goes a long way. That phone call, that letter that's personally signed from you, that invitation to an event is definitely going to go farther than a blanket letter not signed, and then a Facebook post that's like, I'm running, give me, $10. Let's see, some questions are coming in here. Yeah, things to avoid with fundraising, any bad ideas. I'm sure I've heard of bad ideas. I think I've done a good amount of fundraising. A bad idea is this. If you are thinking about an event, or someone is pitching you on an event, and all you see are money signs for what the event is going to cost, don't do it. This is a fundraiser. You are looking to raise money. So if someone is suggesting something that is going to be quite costly at the front end, do not do it. Do not do it. Your fundraisers should be either free, thanks to in-kind contributions, or should be very inexpensive. The purpose is to raise money. So anyone with a big idea that costs a lot of money on the front end, we really don't have that kind of money and time to waste in local races. So don't go there. So back to the team that you're going to have. You want to track your spending and your raising. So back to that treasurer or deputy treasurer, or someone that's going to help you, depending on what kind of candidate you are, mayor or local office candidate, you got to track your expenses. And so those expenses are going to be what we went over. And so you want to take a look and make sure that your expenses are all coming in. Are they under? Are they over? Someone needs to be watching that. Now, you're going to be very busy as a candidate. As I mentioned before, local candidates are often the ones doing a little bit of everything. So this might be you, but get some help. If you're a mayor candidate, you definitely should have a team, and you should definitely have a treasurer that is tracking the expenses, seeing how you're doing, to the good or the bad, and then take a look at the money that you're bringing in. Is it good? Is it bad? You're then going to need to make some decisions. Are you not bringing in enough money? Are there things you can tweak to bring in more, to do better? If you can't, you're going to cut from the budget. You have no choice. If you're doing really well, that's terrific. And you want to be in that position where then in the final weeks of the campaign, you're actually adding things. As I said at the top, you're adding, another mailer. You're adding, other outreach efforts. You're adding that, page in the newspaper, that ad in the newspaper that's not so targeted, but you've already hit people over the head with mail so much, why not? So you want to be able to know where you're at. Doesn't make any sense finishing the campaign with a ton of money in the bank. No use, no good there. So use it in ways that are, efficient and that are a good use of your campaign funds. And so you got to track your spending and you got to track your raising as you go along. And the other thing that is really so important is that you've got to thank people. Do not wait till the end of the campaign to thank those who gave you money. You should thank people who gave you money with a nice handwritten note or a letter that you can sign, adding on a handwritten note within 2 or 3 weeks of them making that contribution. One, it's just the right thing to do. It's nice to thank people. It's nice to do it timely, but it also allows you to continue that conversation with them. It's not one and done. So somebody gave to you in June, and then in November, they see that you won or you lost and they get the thank you letter. Thank them immediately, because they're continuing to be a part of a conversation. You might inspire them to maybe host an event for you, to maybe bring in some other people into the fold to help you. They might think you're just doing a great job and they only gave $40 and they actually want to give another 60 and get to an even 100. So it's about relationship building, and it's about thanking people for their help for your campaign. And if you do that, there's a very good chance that they're going to want to continue to be a part of it and to ask you how they can help. So please thank people. Thank them initially, and then at the end of the campaign, win or lose, thank them all again, because they really played an important role in offering you financial support to make it happen. So with that was some of my initial thoughts about building that team, making a budget, creating that finance plan, developing that plan, watching it. It's not set in stone. These are all living documents, and really having the help to track your spending, to track your raising, and thank people. And if you do that with respect to a finance plan, and you're working hard on field and your communications, and your social media is included in that communications, you really can have a well-run local campaign. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions that anybody has, or any other ideas. I'm looking at the chat to see if we had any others. So please, I open it to all of you and for any questions. Okay, I think we may have answered all of your questions. So with that, I don't know if
There-
Kara
Yeah,
Hey,
Jimmy,
Kara.
somebody did just post a question, unrelated. I don't know if you can see it, completely unrelated, but what is the current status of SB 842 and the public option?
I do not know, but you should chat with your state legislator.
Okay. If there are no other questions, then I'll just say thank you. Thank you to Jimmy for a wonderful presentation that, as he said, or as I heard, it's kind of a daunting and intimidating task, but a necessary one, and done right can be successful. And I'd like to thank all of you attendees for attending. You have the materials. If you have any questions, feel free to email newtownctdems@gmail.com. Thank you, everyone.